Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. I hope you had a nice week and you're ready for a wonderful weekend. So let's see what we're going to talk about tonight. Of course, the protests that are taking place or expected to take place over the next number of days, maybe weeks, even months, depending on how Nigel Farage frames this. Want to talk about a wealth tax that Rachel Reeves seems to be dodging, but maybe Gary Stevenson is able to push forward. The Green Party are having their vote today, I believe, for their new leader. Oh, and something happened. Okay, I'm back. My monitor just switched off for some reason. And then talking about Jeremy Corbyn and a push to rejoin the European Union. So is Jeremy Corbyn on board, or is it just his new party, or what the hell is going on? So guys, remember to smash the like button. It helps the algorithm, and let's jump into it. So the first story of tonight, of course, is... Actually, no, I want to do this one instead. So GB News visited some people who were protesting, I believe, last year, and they're asking them if they're going to protest again this year. And surprise, shock, horror, yes, they're going to protest again.
Now, Jez, you're one of the people that has been organising protests at the local migrant hotel. What
looks a bit like Lee Anderson.
Is it important to stage those protests? And thinking back to a year ago when we saw demonstrations across the country, does that show that not really much has changed in the way of solving the problems that you see here?
Nothing's changed in the whole year. We've been...
I just want to respond to a comment there. It's about Tommy Robinson always seems to be out of the country at the process against migrants our silly season. Yes, isn't it strange how, Tommy Robinson suddenly is in Spain, relaxing on a beach or in front of a swimming pool or in a swimming pool for some reason. This is a guy who's always having legal problems, money problems, but somehow is always on holiday. And it always happens when there's a protest taking place. I think for his sake, he needs to attend some of these protests, because it's going to be difficult for him to drum up support for his GoFundMe or whatever it is to cover his legal costs if if he's not in town. He can't be always on the beach. For a guy who hates foreigners, he spends more time, it seems, in foreign countries than he does in Britain. Anyway.
Protesting up there for 2 years now. If I'd say anything, in the last year it's got worse in Aldershot. We try and protest up there at least twice a month. You've only got to look around the town.
Okay, so this guy has been protesting twice a month since the riots. And the protest, what is it? To stop asylum seekers from coming to Britain. And how successful has he been? I don't think he's been very successful at all. Like I've said before, I don't believe many of these protests are legitimate. But even if people are concerned about immigration, they're concerned about people being moved into ex-hotels, and there are obviously some people being moved in who are potentially dangerous individuals or who are going to be getting up to no good, why not protest outside the Home Office? Because it's the Home Office that will decide, that is deciding, where the asylum seekers are going. So if you don't want them in your area, wouldn't it make more sense to protest outside the Home Office? Because maybe if you do eventually get the place closed down, well, then they'll be redistributed in the local area. There's a chance that they could be moved to another hotel or ex-hotel somewhere else. But it's more likely that if the hotel is closed down, the asylum seekers will be put in other forms of housing. But anyway...
There's lots of illegal men hanging around. Women, if you...
Illegal men. Illegal men. Okay. So he's talking about asylum seekers, but he's not talking... But he's describing these as illegal men. What's a legal man? Am I a legal man? Are you a legal man? Are you a legal woman on the stream tonight? Or are you an illegal man or woman? I was just at a Stop the Genocide protest outside my MP Peter Tech Whiz Kid Kyle's office in Hove. Bigger than anything there. Won't be in the media. Well said. Yeah. I didn't know about this. Why are these protests not being covered? Reform TV, of course, will interview people who aren't even protesting at the moment and talk about the protest, but they won't actually interview people who are involved in bigger protest taking place as Urban Legends is doing. And kudos to you for for attending this. But of course, as you said, the media is not covering it. Why? That's an interesting question.
If you walked in the town and asked the women, I'd say 80% of them would tell you they don't feel safe walking around this town. We want to know.
So this thing of people don't feel safe, there is a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy here. So you have, the likes of Reform or the BNP or UKIP or whoever telling people the place is unsafe. And then, of course, people get the impression that, well, maybe it is unsafe. And then if they're asked, is the place unsafe? They'll probably say, well, maybe it is. Well, it may not actually be unsafe. It may be perfectly safe, but they're being convinced that it's unsafe. Now, we've seen a few examples of when Reform UK MPs, or was it an MP or councillor, who was talking about how Sarah Potchin saying that her town, one of her streets, was completely unsafe, that migrants were running rampant, that there was antisocial behaviour, there was criminality, and then the people on the street were like, no, there isn't. It's perfectly safe. Look, it's clean. There is some accommodation housing asylum seekers, but there's never been any problems. And what was Sarah Potchin's response to that? I'm going to sue you.
Where these people are going when they've left the hotel, where they're roaming around in the daytime. We've also asked...
Okay, yeah, why are they roaming around? Because they have nothing to do. Because they're not allowed to work. If they were allowed to work, they would be going to work. They would not be roaming around. Like, imagine any situation where you're forced to stay in a hotel for years, in some cases years. You're not allowed to work. There's a curfew. You have to be back at 10 o'clock or you have to be back at 9 o'clock. You have to sign in. You have to sign out. A bit like a prison, although you're allowed to get out, but your movements are monitored. What are you going to do all day? You're not allowed to get a job. You're not allowed to move around. You have to stay in the location. What do they expect people to do? Like, the solution here would be to process the claims faster so that these individuals could move on to the next stage, which would be, of course, refugee status and then, indefinite leave to remain. They could work, they could contribute, or they're deported if they have no right to stay. But these people are not... Why isn't he campaigning to process more asylum seekers?
What accommodation they're being put into. We never get answers from the council or for the MP. We're pretty certain people are being housed in flats in the town, but nobody will answer our questions. Surely governments and councillors are there to represent us and help us with questions locals have got to ask. Now,
look, while this guy may not be completely, how can I say, he may be disingenuous, what he's doing is he's raising a concern that many people have. People don't like the idea of not being told what's going on. And I think this is going to create a lot of problems for the Labour government. And Reform are going to, of course, latch on to that and say, hey, we're the only ones who are asking these questions. Where are these asylum seekers? Why aren't we monitoring their position? Like, why aren't we following up on where they are? What are they doing all day? Reform are going to latch on to this and they're going to use it for their own political purposes. And the government need to be more transparent about this, because if they're not, you leave a gap, you leave a vacuum, and somebody else will fill that vacuum, like Farage.
So when the Prime Minister says he's going to smash the gangs, when they come out with plans to try and stop the boat crossings, say that they're going to take asylum seekers out of hotels, do you believe them? Do you think that plan is credible? Do you think that plan could work and make a difference for places like Aldershot?
My thoughts on Keir Starmer: he couldn't smash an egg.
Okay, he couldn't smash an egg. Okay, all right, okay.
When he opens his mouth, if his lips are moving, you know that some truth's coming out. I've not heard one thing he said in the last year about immigration, about migrants, about illegal boat crossings that I can credibly believe. It's all...
See, this is the problem with pandering to the Farage lot. There's nothing you can say, there's nothing Keir Starmer can say to this guy that will convince him that he's on his side. That's the problem. They are the gang, Max. Good point. Heard that reform are gaining ground in my neck of the woods, the Midlands. This is the problem. And this is... You have a number of issues working in Reform UK's favour. You have an economy that's not doing very well, so this is going to help the far right. You have immigration, which is being pushed front and centre. What happened to the cost of living crisis? Why isn't that being talked about? What about the NHS? Why is that not being talked about? They are the issues that impact ordinary people's lives, but it's been pushed to the back burner. It's been pushed to the end of the queue. What's been put front and centre? Immigration. And Labour and the Conservatives can't out Farage. All Farage has to do, all Reform have to do is say, we would do it better. And all they have to do is point to every problem in society and say, that's because of immigration. Housing, it's because of immigrants. Poverty, it's because of immigrants. The NHS waiting list, it's because of immigrants. So in the same way as Farage was able to convince people to vote to leave the European Union because everything was the fault of the EU, he's doing exactly the same thing with immigration. And unfortunately, the two main political parties are attempting to not even out Farage, but attempting to pander to his base. And there's nothing you can do. It's insane when I see the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch and the Tories, constantly talking about immigration. Every time they mention immigration, 2 or 3 extra voters move towards Reform. Every time they speak about immigration, because their record for anyone who's concerned about immigration is dismal. So every time you talk about it, you're reinforcing this idea. I made an analogy on social media. It's like, I don't remind my wife about the leaky tap that I didn't fix. Okay? Hey, I remember I was meant to fix that tap and I didn't do it. Don't worry, I'll do it in 6 months' time. Okay? You don't do this. The Tories' record on immigration is terrible, but they keep bringing up the point of immigration. They should be talking about something else. I don't know what, anything. But it's insane. They'd contaminate Chernobyl. We have a super chat from Brad. Thanks so much, Brad. These guys are so extreme. If you sent them to Chernobyl, they come back with fewer deformities. Oh my goodness. Brad should do stand-up. I think Brad should do stand-up. Should we have a vote for Brad doing stand-up? I think so. Chris Philip is awful. Still banging on about Rwanda. Rwanda, 750 million pounds down the toilet. Those houses that were built to house asylum seekers sold off. Like the Rwandan government said, look, are you going to use these properties or not? We've built all these homes and, we haven't heard anything from the Tories yet. So we better just sell them off. Like, we have a housing crisis of our own, so let's put people into them. What's the point in having these homes sitting? I imagine politicians in Rwanda were under pressure. Hey, look, we have a housing crisis and we have hundreds of houses, newly built ones, sitting idle. And the Tories have no plans to send anyone over. So let's just put people in them. And they did the right thing. But, Rwanda was just about to work. If it hadn't been if there hadn't been an election called by, what's his name, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, the Tory leader, if he hadn't called an election, they would have sent tens of thousands of people straight away to Rwanda. Of course, that was nonsensical because Rwanda had said that there would be limits on how many people could be sent. Maybe hundreds of people. And then, the whole thing of it being a deterrent, like as if people who are in Uganda, people who are in Libya at the moment, trying to cross the Mediterranean to get to Italy, hoping to travel through Europe to Calais and eventually risk their lives to cross the channel on a small boat, those people would be checking the internet to see, what about this bill of Rwanda? What's happening with Rwanda? They may be able to send a few hundred of us to that country. They may, as if that's a deterrent. Somebody on social media said, this was really good. They had said, the Tories should and Reform should stop telling people that when you arrive in Britain, you get benefits and you get a free hotel and you get all these things because it's creating a pull factor. It's untrue, but it's creating a pull factor. So shouldn't they actually shut up if they don't want people to cross the channel? They're creating a disaster for themselves. All mouth and no trousers. Also heard GB News is watching. It's watched by more people than watch BBC News. This is cherry picking date. So and also this thing of we have higher ratings than the BBC, or we have higher ratings than Channel 4, or we have higher ratings than Sky News. Yes, but that's like saying, cat videos on TikTok have more views than, political shows. Yeah, that's true. And we know the reason why. So it's not, but isn't GB News meant to be an entertainment channel? When they were challenged by Ofcom, they said, no, we're actually an entertainment channel. We're not a news channel. And then after they said, yes, of course we're a news channel. A bit like Fox News in the US. They were being sued over misinformation. And then their defense was, no, we're actually entertainment. We're not news. It's called Fox News, but the news part is just a label. We don't actually engage in news. Wasn't there something like that with GB News? The same defense? I don't know if that was actually the case, but I remember hearing something about it. I call them Reform TV because that's what they're basically doing. They're pumping out Reform UK material. Anyway, let's move away from the protester for a moment. I wanted to show you this clip with Tom Swarbrick, where he was talking about taxes, and then we'll get on to a wealth tax in just a moment. Have a listen to this.
Why are you paying more for less?
Well, simple, mate, because the country doesn't have any assets. They were all sold off. Suck it up, because the country is 100% reliant on taxation.
It's not true.
The country is 100% reliant on taxation. Where do these people come from? 100% reliant on tax. Like, he doesn't know anything about borrowing. He doesn't know anything about investments. He doesn't know anything about the sale of assets. Yes, there are fewer assets, but it's not just taxation that raises finance for the government.
I mean, we're not 100%
What do you mean
reliant.
it's not true?
Well,
Just a minute.
Because we have
Just a minute.
foreign direct investment from overseas.
Sorry?
We have overseas investors who spend hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds in telecoms and infrastructure and all kinds of different investments in this country, utilities.
How old are you, mate? How old are you?
How old am I? Too close to 40.
Right, well, I'm 25 years above you.
I don't
so
care.
I've experienced it. I know you don't.
It's like, I have experience. It's like, what the hell? It's like, I'm right because I'm older. No, it doesn't work like that. You're right if you have the facts in front of you. The facts are right. The facts are the facts, irrespective of your age. This is really weird. A really weird call.
Yeah, mate, because you don't listen, do you? You don't listen.
Well, I've listened, but you're wrong. It's not. I have listened, and I've listened really carefully to you saying we're 100% reliant on.
That's your opinion.
No, it's not.
That's your
Colin, I'm
opinion.
afraid it is literally counting in this case.
Tell me what assets this country has, and tell me what assets the likes of France and Germany have.
You're right. We don't have a sovereign.
Exactly.
Well,
We don't have anything. We've got a $3 trillion. Listen, you keep interrupting, mate.
Because you keep getting it wrong, and you keep telling me I'm wrong because I'm 25 years younger than you. All I was doing was gently suggesting that the country isn't 100% reliant on taxes to fund itself. That's all I was doing, Colin.
Oh my goodness, and that's quite sad. Should the left create chicken coup news as a counterpoint to Fox? That's a good point. Yes. Sorry in advance, but they come from England. I'll read some more of your comments. Nigel is taking calls on LBC now. Oh, God. Wasn't he on LBC yesterday? Does he have his own parking space at the LBC studios? This is part of the problem. This is the fundamental problem. The media giving people like Nigel Farage and others in Reform a platform, but also an unchallenged one. Did you see the interview with Nick Ferrari? Hopefully you didn't. You were spared that. I had to watch some of it. But no pushback whatsoever. Like when Nick Ferrari has a government minister on, he has this sort of thing where he has this counter where wherever they don't answer a question, he goes ding 1, ding 2, ding 3. So he has this thing of, oh, look, I'm embarrassing the government minister. And rightly so in some cases. You know, government ministers, when they go on these shows, should have their ducks in a row. They should know exactly what they're talking about. They should have the data in front of them. If they're going to talk about something, even if it's not their brief, they should have the basics at least. And in many cases, it's really embarrassing. But you never see Nick Ferrari do that with Nigel Farage. Why is that? Why does Nick Ferrari never go, why does Nigel Farage never go, or very, very rarely go on James O'Brien's show? When was the last time, you know, you can have a look on YouTube and you can find the last interview that Nigel Farage did with James O'Brien, and it was like 3 years ago. Well, you only have to go back weeks, maybe even days when it comes to an interview between Nick Ferrari and Nigel Farage. Isn't that so strange? You know, Farage is always about we need to hold politicians to account, unless they're me. Alistair, thank you so much for that super chat. Very kind of you. I've said this many times. In the UK needs to follow Scotland and have 6 tax brackets. The RUK, the rest of the UK has only 3, and the extra tax goes to public services. I haven't noticed it about the 3 extra a week. It's about £3 extra a week. Yes, an extra tax bracket would create, and I think maybe the Greens in England are talking about something. They were talking about something like this. You know, there is a lot of focus on a wealth tax. There is a focus on taxing the rich more. But exactly as you said there, in introducing a new tax bracket would, you know, it would take away some of the toxicity that the right tried to push into this. You know, if you introduce a new tax bracket, it's more difficult for them to say, oh, you're going after the rich, leave the rich alone, they're going to leave the country. No, it's just a new tax bracket. But also, I think it's important to separate income tax from a wealth tax, because the tax on wealth is very different, because the people who are going to Dubai or claiming to be going to Dubai because they don't want to stay in Britain, they're the ones who are paying income tax. They're the ones who are being taxed on their income, not on their wealth. The ones who are being taxed on their wealth, they're not really leaving because their wealth is in the country. You know, it's very difficult. It's not impossible, but it is difficult to sell land or to sell assets, to turn those into cash and get that money out of the country. It's not impossible, but it is quite difficult. You could have an exit tax for those who want to leave as well. Okay, you want to go? Well, then you pay an exit tax. There are a number of different ways, but a new tax bracket would be a great approach, because there are a lot of people who earn a significant amount of money, not just based on wealth, but, you know, on income, and they could be taxed a little bit more. And of course, it would take the sting out of the tail from the right wing, who are constantly banging on about, oh, no, we leave these people alone. They're the wealth creators. Brad, once again, thank you so much, Brad. When Farage passes away, every media outlet will shut down for 3 weeks while all the reporters and journalists take bereavement leave. They'll be wearing black. You know, you'll see Nick Ferrari in a veil, a black veil. And they'll be doing reruns of, you know, the Farage on a boat and stuff like that in 2015, 2016. Him, you know, turning his back on Ode to Joy in the European Parliament stuff. You know, the wonderful stuff. Him shouting at immigrants from his Range Rover, stuff like that. You know, the joyful stuff from the past. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Brad. And Alistair. We have one from Ivan. Great to see you on the stream tonight again, Ivan. Yesterday I deleted about a dozen people on my Facebook list when I discovered that they are secret reform supporters. I won't have hate and division on my networks. Well done. I think there was a sort of secret minority, and now with Farage in the ascendance, more and more people are feeling more comfortable about expressing, I'm a supporter of Nigel Farage, I'm a supporter of reform. The saddest part is a lot of these people are the ones who voted for Brexit. a lot of these people are the most vulnerable in society. Not the most vulnerable, but these are people who are, close to poverty. There are, of course, middle-class voters who used to vote for the Tories who are switching to Reform. But the Reform base seems to be ordinary people who are, who go to food banks, or ordinary people who are on universal credit, or ordinary people who are struggling to get by, to make ends meet. And they're voting for Reform. They're voting for a party of the rich for the rich. I don't mean it to be a cliche, but that's what Farage represents. Did he support the workers' rights bill? Of course not, because he's on the side of unscrupulous employers. The whole point of Brexit was about stripping away protections for the environment, for workers and for consumers. Max, what do you think about the name Keir dying out? Yes, this was an interesting one. This is a really strange thing for me, because I should know better, but I was when I first heard about Keir Starmer, so that was back, 2018, 2019. This was before, I cover these things a lot closer than a lot of people. And this is not bragging. It's just I'm more of a political junkie than your average person on the street. But when I first heard about Keir Starmer, I was like, Keir, that's a name that you don't hear very often. And then I realized, yes, it's after the first leader of the Labour Party, or the Labour movement at the time. It wasn't actually, I don't think it was called the Labour Party. It was the Cooperation Labour or something like that, or the Labour Committee or something like that. So it wasn't actually called the Labour Party at the very beginning, but I think its founder was called Keir, and I forget his surname. But it was a name, a very left-wing name like Marx or Karl or something like that. But it's it is dying out, and it seems that Mohammed is actually the most popular name for boys at the moment. Now, there's the reason why. It's not because according to the right, Muslims are replacing Christians in Britain or something. It's if you have any group, you're going to have which generally selects one name. Of course, you're going to have that as the most popular. Like if you have 100 people and 5 of them are Muslims, and then everyone else is choosing different names, and most of the Muslims will be called Muhammad, then of course you're going to have the most popular name will be Muhammad. It's not because the majority are Muslim, it's because the majority of names was Muhammad. It's not because everyone else is called John or Rick or Keir or Nigel or something like that. That's just how things work. Keir Hardy, sorry. Keir sounds a nit like air. Not all toolmakers' sons are called Keir. Did you know his father was a toolmaker? Which is actually quite interesting, because toolmaker is not like, it's not a working class position. It's actually middle class, because he's making the tools for the machines. So he's not actually doing the machine work. He's making the tools. So I think he had a small business, so he was like middle class, not actually working class. Meant Keir sounds a bit like queer. Sorry, need a new keyboard and new fingers. I can't do anything about that, unfortunately. What did his mum do, though? I think his mum was... I think she ran a charity for donkeys. Not in Mind Chatty. His father was a toolmaker and his mother was a toolmaker. Yes. Why is Robespierre so anti-Tory? It's a good question. Why am I anti-Tory? Because I'm against people who have nothing but contempt for ordinary people. And the Conservatives have nothing but... Now, when I talk about the Tories, I'm talking about the party. There are obviously people within the Conservative Party who are decent individuals, but the party as a whole has nothing but contempt for ordinary people. And if you don't believe me, look at what they did during austerity. Austerity was this idea of, let's take money from the poorest in society and give it to the rich. The rich got richer, the poor got poor, and about 300,000 people were killed by austerity. And you just look at some of the interviews since then. Therese Coffey, former DWP minister or Secretary of State. Claire Smith, I did a video with her recently. these people, when they're presented with, this is very telling. Like, in a normal situation, if somebody told you, my friend died, your natural reaction as a human being would be, oh my God, that's terrible. Now imagine if you were responsible for that person dying. What would your reaction be? You'd be like, oh my goodness, I didn't know this happened. Is there something I can do? I'm in charge of this department and somebody died because of that. A normal person, this is me projecting. I would be first ashamed. Then I would say, okay, what can we do to stop this from happening in the future? What can we do to support that family? That's what I would do. Therese Coffey's response when she heard somebody had died of starvation who was meant to be getting the benefits and they did not get those benefits was when she heard that they died, not that, it was a hypothetical. No, it was a case of somebody dying of starvation because they were cut off from the benefits they needed to survive. Her response was, well, we have measures in place for people to access benefits. Sorry, somebody had died and your automatic response was, well, I need to defend the government. So this is one of the reasons why I'm anti-Tory. Because they have the party as a whole has nothing but contempt for ordinary people. And they'll use issues like immigration, Dominic Raab, when he heard about people using food banks. I've said before, food banks should not exist. Food banks are a demonstration of failure of government. If a food bank exists, it means the government has failed. No food banks should exist. So when Dominic Raab heard that there was a food bank, his response was, well, people use them because they have cash flow problems. He even took a selfie outside a food bank. We had, I think it was, what's her name? The one who carried the sword, the former Speaker of the House, the leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt. Penny Mordaunt was interviewed and she was saying about how, she was, I think she was taking a photo, opening a food bank with the frigging scissors. There was a ribbon, let's open a food bank. She also talked about food pantries and stuff like this. They exist because you did not do your frigging job. People should not have to rely on food banks. Sorry, this is a real, and I mean no offense by this is a real triggering issue for me because it means that government has failed. The job of government is to look after its citizens, to protect them using the military, to maintain law and order using the police, to have public services to look after the citizens. And not everyone can work, so we need to make sure that people who can't work get the support they need. We know that there are people who are elderly. We need to look after them. And we, of course, look after children. And we need to lift people out of poverty. There's no reason for poverty to exist. The government have the means. If they don't have the means, then they have no right to be called a government. But the government have the means to lift people out of poverty, to eliminate poverty. If they wanted to, they could eliminate poverty. They don't for political reasons. It's a political choice to allow poverty to exist. So when there are things like food banks, it means that the government has failed. Because the benefit system is not sufficient to provide people with the means to survive. So it's offloading responsibility, allowing people to go to food banks. When Labour were last in power, I think there were 4 food banks in the entirety of the UK. 4! Not 4, not 400, 4. Now there are more food banks than there are McDonald's. There are more homeless people than there are more churches than there are homeless people. That's another interesting statistic. So the government, then you say, well, homelessness it's difficult to No, Finland resolved homelessness. Didn't work and somewhat deal with. No, they resolved homelessness. And you know how they did that? They built people homes. I know it sounds really weird. What? You solve homelessness by giving people homes? Yes, they created communities. They allowed people to live in these homes. They didn't charge them any rent. They said, you can live in these homes. And what happened? People were able to rebuild their lives. Were there issues? Of course, there are always going to be issues. But you don't say, we're not going to do anything because there will be some issues. No, you try and work through it. They built homes for people. They provided them accommodation. And then what happened? people were able to call something their home. They started to have pride in their home. They realized, now I can rebuild my life because I have a fixed address. I can go to an employer and say, look, this is where I live. So they were able to build gradually. It's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. But if the government wanted to, they could end homelessness and they could end poverty. But it's a political decision not to, unfortunately. Sorry, there's my anti-Tory rant over for a bit. For a bit. Food banks are the shame of this country. Yes, there is absolutely no justification. And this is a question I would love to ask a politician, a sitting politician. What are you going to do about food banks? Do you understand that they should not exist? There's no justification for them. Are you including Brexit in that record? I thought that was 30p Lee. Could Jeremy Corbyn's new party be our only hope to smash reform and the fascists? So I was going to get to that. I'll get to it a little bit later, Bill, but it's an interesting question, yes. I don't know. So they're doing very well in the polls. They're doing very well with numbers. There have also been some defections, it seems, from Labour. Some councillors have become independents, and now they're going to join Jeremy Corbyn's party. I think they need to come up with a name pretty soon. It's going to be difficult. We're defecting to what? So I think they should come up with a name pretty quickly. Not because it's necessary to have a name, but it's at least something to refer to would be handy. Max, it's nearly twice that now that it's gone up in the last 3 years. Big time. The food banks, Alistair, yes. And homelessness and poverty are going to... But once again, there's no justification. Like when it comes to the wealth tax, let's get on to that story because I'm blabbing a lot and then I don't get around to talking about the things I want to talk about. I deserve a slap on the wrist for that. Anyway, let's move on to this. So Chancellor Rachel Reeves dodges wealth tax calls from predecessor. Annalise Dodds, the former Shadow Chancellor, made the demand on the Electoral Dysfunction podcast. It comes with the government's financials being in a precarious position ahead of the autumn budget. Rachel Reeves has dodged calls from her predecessor. Okay, when Sir Keir Starmer became a Labour leader in 2020, Miss Dodds was his first pick for Shadow Chancellor. However, she did not last long and was replaced by Miss Reeves, who then got the government job after the last election win. Speaking to the Sky News political editor Beth Rigby on the Electoral Dysfunction podcast, Miss Dodds said that she had examined wealth taxes when she was briefly in the Shadow Chancellor job and how they could be implemented. She said, I would hope the Treasury is considering that kind of evidence as well as other changes that would be put forward. So it seems she was supportive of the idea of a wealth tax, but Rachel Reeves is not interested in a wealth tax. See, once again, my only criticism of some of the rhetoric around the wealth tax is it's not a silver bullet, okay? It's not going to fix all problems, but it's certainly a massive step in that direction. Because you take money from people who have built up a huge amount of wealth. They don't need that amount of wealth. Like when it's presented by the far right and GB News and others, I should maybe stop calling them the far right, but the right-wing commentators, they'll present it as, oh, look, it's you're going after the wealth creators, or you're going after people who create jobs or business owners. No, it's not really directed at them. It's directed at the mega wealthy, people who have hundreds of millions, billions of pounds sitting in assets. And of course, as the asset price rises, it raises the prices of other assets. So this is in part why housing is so expensive. Joe Politics interviewed a landlord some months back or some weeks back, a guy who has 1,000 properties. Whenever we hear about, well, we just need to build more houses. Okay, That's part of the solution. But if some guy buys 1,000 houses, okay, or he has 1,000 houses, then increasing the supply isn't really going to fix the problem, is it? So if you were to tax him more, he would have to sell some of those properties to pay the wealth tax. And then what would happen? Well, those properties would be available for sale, and maybe other landlords would buy them, but it's also possible homeowners would buy them. And then what you do is you move those homeowners who are currently renting into these homes, and then you free up other accommodation to rent for other people. So it takes pressure off. So a wealth tax is a good step in the right. It's a step in the right direction. It's not going to fix all problems, but as Alistair said, a change to the tax band could be another way. This is going after the richest, who earn income from their work, but also people who earn money from wealth. They should be taxed more. They have the response is, "Oh, you're taxing me again." No, you're earning money from doing nothing. It's basically a passive income. If you have wealth, because if the price of if you buy a piece of property for 100,000 this year and then sell it next year for 200,000, you've done nothing. You haven't worked to earn that extra 100,000. You just sat around waiting for it. Now, I know there is stamp duty and stuff like capital gains, but a tax on wealth has to be considered, and unfortunately, it's not even been mentioned, or it's been rejected by the government. Because if it doesn't happen, and maybe some of you have seen this clip, is from Gary Stevenson a few days ago. This is what happens if you don't deal with wealth inequality.
Everybody in the street knows the political centre has failed. Everybody knows. So something has to change. There's a quote from Milton Friedman, American economist. At times of crisis, the new idea will be chosen from the ideas lying around at the time. Everybody knows that we will get something new in politics. And it is really obvious what the loudest idea lying around now is, which is the far right. And the second loudest idea is us. Tax the rich. So if you are a billionaire and you know that politics is going to move either towards the far right or tax the rich, what are you going to do? You are going to fund the far right, and they are doing it aggressively. Look at what Elon Musk is doing. These guys know that they don't want to pay higher taxes, and they are correct that the way to prevent yourself from having to pay higher taxes is to aggressively fund the far right. Everybody...
And he's right once again. This is what they're going to do. They realize, look, in order to avoid paying these taxes, this wealth tax, well, we just fund Nigel Farage and the far right. And we succeed because we don't care about, them being racist. We don't care about them having problems with trans people. We don't care about these things. We care about the bottom line. We care about our money. We're happy to look the other way. We will not associate ourselves with Nigel Farage or people on the far right, but we'll be happy to see them in power because they will look after us. They look after us when it comes to finance. We saw it in the 1930s. The rise of Hitler was in part because of the industrialists. The industrialists saw, okay, there's the rise of the communists or the rise of this other guy. Well, the communists are going to clamp down on us. They're going to come after our money. They're going to impose restrictions on us, our ability to fire and rehire people. They're going to support the unions. Well, we don't want any of that. But there's this other guy with a weird mustache who's saying, well, he's not going to do any of that stuff. So we better support him. And that's not in a nutshell, but that's pretty much exactly what happened. Ivan, thank you so much once again for that super chat. It's wealth taxes, not a wealth tax that we need. Rich people have ways to transfer money overseas. We need land tax reform, equalize capital gains tax with income tax, levy VAT on financial services. 100% agreement. Yes. So each of those that you mentioned there, taxing people's ability to transfer money. So if they just want to, let's just liquidate everything and transfer it to Dubai or whatever, you need to be able to go after that. Land reform. One of the reasons it seems that Jeremy Clarkson bought a farm was in order to avoid inheritance tax. That needs to change. But also land tax. If you're, instead of taxing homes, tax land. There are vast tracts of land which are not being properly taxed. Equalized capital gains and income tax. Yes, how is it possible that people who are doing no work are paying less tax than people who are working? That's insane. Like, why is capital gains at a lower rate than income tax? You know, somebody made the example before how Rishi Sunak's cleaner pays more tax, a higher rate of tax, than Rishi Sunak himself. I'm not picking Rishi Sunak to be, I'm not picking on Rishi Sunak here, but an example was given. Staff working in Rishi Sunak's house pay a higher rate of tax than Rishi Sunak on his investments. And when it comes to an investment, you're not doing any work. You just, it's just like, oh, let me check. How much money have I made today? That's what it is. That's what it's about. Well, maybe I'll do that, move the investment from one portfolio to another or something like that. I don't know anything about investments, as you can imagine. That's how it works. That's what they're doing. They're not actually doing any work, but they're making a huge amount of money out of it. Well said, Ivan. And a levy on financial services. Yeah, I would also add to that a transaction tax. Every time a transaction takes place, a tax should be placed on that. I think it was Bernie Sanders who tried to push for that, because we're in a cashless society. We see more and more money being transferred this way. Gara, thank you so much. That's super chat. Great to see you on the stream tonight. Funny how all those wealth creators throw their private school caviar and tendered contracts out of their limousine when the unskilled strike. Well said. Yes. Yeah, like, I'm struggling to get by. It's so difficult sending my son Rupert to Eton. Do not increase VAT on private education, or I won't be able to send Rupert to Eton anymore. We'll have to cut back. We'll have to downgrade from a Rolls to a BMW. Can you imagine the shame? Maybe not a Rolls to a BMW. What would be more accurate? A Rolls to a Bentley. Bentley is cheaper than Rolls Royce, I think. Max, if you overtax the rich people, won't you drive them to flee the UK, which will leave the UK in poverty? Well, that's one of the arguments put forward about taxing the rich. Thanks, Kevin Ladd, also for that support with your peach. I love the peach. That's one of the arguments put forward. If you tax them more, and there is, you see, the problem is that these people have gained everything because they are living in the country. So I don't buy so much the idea that if you increase the taxes on them, they'll flee, because some of them can, but we're talking about people who perhaps earn a living, online, or they, through shares and stuff like that. So they can go anyway. And there's always this argument that if you increase taxes on rich people, they'll find loopholes. Well, then close the loopholes. We don't say, well, we better not have a speed limit because, well, people will find a way around it. No, we have, normal laws exist for a reason. So I think if you were to say, well, we shouldn't, are you going to lose some people? Yes, you are. But if you want to fund public services, you need to increase taxes on the people who have benefited from those public services. The richest in society have benefited from a free NHS. They have benefited from free education. They have benefited from all of these things. So it's only right that they pay something back to continue those. If you listen to the patriotic millionaires, they make very valid points about why it's not always going to be the case that if you tax them more, they're going to flee. Some will, yes. But it's difficult to find numbers, because one of the think tanks that was putting forward data for people who are fleeing because taxes were rising, the data was based on changes to LinkedIn profiles, which is not very accurate, not very scientific. Think the shame of turning up at an opening back in a BMW. Thanks, Peter. The shame. Oh my goodness. I was supposed to do a moment break, but we'll continue on because I talk too much. Had to swap olive oil for fry light. Rich bit. Thanks, Gareth. Yeah. Well, one of the things that rich people have, but they don't seem to understand that you see this sort of rich people who don't understand what wealth is. Like, they don't understand that they're rich. They think that everyone has stuff like that. If they flee, revoke their citizenship. Well, I'm not of the idea of like, so if somebody leaves, they lose their citizenship, because people may leave for legitimate reasons. But you could have an exit tax. So if you want to leave the country, well, if you want to take your money with you, you have to pay to do that. So it may be, and it would have to be pretty significant, so there'd be no incentive to move the money out. But I think it's a bit of a storm in a teacup. It's been pushed by people who just don't. It's the same as whenever you hear stories. Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, Urban Legends. If they flee, revoke it. Yeah, thanks so much, Urban. There is this sort of scaremongering, and we heard it before when it came to the minimum wage. Whenever there was talk about, we're going to increase the minimum wage by £1 or £1.50, you heard people on the right saying, it's going to result in businesses closing, and business owners were saying, no, we can't. We'll end up closing our businesses if we have to pay an extra quid in minimum wage. And then after a year, the businesses are still operating. People are earning a bit more money. They're spending more in the economy. And, it was at the end of the day scaremongering. Will some businesses struggle because they have to pay a little bit more in the minimum wage? Yes, of course. But you can't stop progress because of one or two businesses or a minority. Gareth, thank you so much again for that super chat. Catherine Tate did the great Rich Mommy sketch. Yes, I think I remember that. That was really good. Anyway, guys, I want to move on to the next story, which is controversial or maybe not. So it says here, this is from the London Economic. It says here, Jeremy Corbyn party could make UK rejoin EU. Now, this headline is a little bit misleading. So let's jump into the main story. Hopefully we'll be able to read it. Sometimes they have like blocks and stuff, but no, it seems to be okay. Yeah, I agree. Your party is currently consulting its supporters. No, thank you. Currently consulting its supporters on a new policy proposal as part of its strategy to gain power in 2029, and there is growing pressure on the leadership to adopt a new policy of calling for Britain to rejoin the single market. Liz Webster, somebody I know very well, Liz Webster, the founder of Save British Farming, wrote on X, "I've responded to Jeremy Corbyn's consultation on forming a new political party. I'm prepared to support them, but only on one condition. Commit to rejoining the EU. Brexit has gutted British farming, wrecked trade, flooded us with substandard imports, driven up food prices, and handed power to corporate elites." So while the headline is a little bit sexy or a little bit controversial, in reality, as I said in a video, this is going to be about consultation. So there will be a lot of people in this new party that would support the idea of rejoining the European Union, or at least the single market and the customs union. Once again, I said before, it doesn't make a lot of sense joining the single market without joining the EU, but let's park that for a bit. So is there a real chance that Jeremy Corbyn's party could support the idea of rejoining? Yes. Never believe a headline. Well said, Christy. So the headline is, of course, to get you to read the article and click on the ads. But it's there is a real possibility that the new party under Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana will be supportive of greater cooperation with the European Union, because a lot of the younger people young people in general are more supportive of a better relationship with Europe. They want to rejoin the European Union. And while Jeremy Corbyn, okay, I want to be very careful what I say here. So Jeremy Corbyn has said on a number of occasions that he voted Remain and he supported remaining in the European Union. Now, the counter argument, of course, has been that, well, he didn't really show very much enthusiasm when there was a chance to undo Brexit. And he called for Article 50 to be triggered right after the referendum. So I'm not going to rehash that, but because I think this is a bit bigger than Jeremy Corbyn, and the party will be probably a bit bigger than Jeremy Corbyn. He may, at the end of the day, just be a figurehead within this new party, Your Party, or whatever it's going to be called. I think it's going to be really a movement more than a party, and I think the goal of it is not to get into power, but to influence power. So to influence the narrative, to drive the Labour Party to the left, in a similar way to what's happening with Reform. Reform were driving the Conservatives to the right, and I think, at least at the moment or at the beginning, Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana's party will not so much be about winning power, because I don't think they'll be able to achieve that, but they will be about steering Labour back to the left, or to the left, whichever term you want to use best, back or to. If they don't explicitly support self-determination of Scotland, Wales, etc., I couldn't care less about this party. I would be off the idea that they would support Scottish independence and Welsh independence. I'd be very surprised if they did not, because once again, I think it's going to be a grassroots movement, and I think a lot of people in the Labour Party, especially the younger people, would be of the idea, I don't have a problem with Scotland becoming independent, and if the Scots want that, then they should be given another referendum. Once again, the language around Scottish independence is really weird, isn't it? Given. It's like somebody gives you something. It's like they have it and they give it to you. It's like a privilege. It shouldn't be like that. It's meant to be a union of equals, but it's like, I don't know. I'm not going to go down that road again, but you know what I mean. A third country cannot join the single market customs union, says Maria. No, not the single market, but there could be a customs union set up that includes the UK. So the EU could agree a customs union. The single market, no. I said before, the only way to get into the single market is through EFTA, and EFTA members have said no to the UK. And the only other way is, there are perhaps other ways, but they're extremely hypothetical. The only other true way would be EU membership. And once again, it makes more sense to be a member at the table writing the rules than being on the outside, being a rule taker. And it's important to remember that Britain now is a rule taker. Brexiteers will say, well, Starmer wants us to be a rule taker. No, Britain is a rule taker at the moment. And I say Britain, not Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland is part of the single market when it comes to goods. Although Northern Ireland is, of course, a rule taker because it's part of the UK. Was it ever a union of equals? That's a good question. I think JC is a waste of time. Jesus Christ, or Jeremy Corbyn, not joking. Is a waste of time. Like treading water, we need fundamental restart, change of direction. I think once again, he could become a figurehead. So he will not be the leader of the party, but they will be. And this is a criticism, not a criticism, but this is a concern I have about this new movement. They need to have a leader. They need to have a single figure at the top. This idea of having a dual leadership, or a deputy leader and leader. No, it need, or a bit like the Green Party where they had two leaders at the top. No, you just have to have one. In this day and age, when it comes to media interviews and it comes to debates and stuff like that, you want to have one leader at the top who will be the figurehead that people talk about. Having it decided by committee or whatever you want to do, but at the end of the day, you need to have one leader. And I'm not sure whether it'll be Jeremy Corbyn. He could be more like a sort of chairman type figure. It could be Zara Sultana, but then I think she's quite young, so they may select somebody else. But I don't know. It's still very early days. But they better get their skates on because time is running out. Ivan again, thank you so much, Ivan. Not that I would change my opinion of them, but what I want to hear is their policies for disabled people. This is the priority for me, not the EU. And I fully understand that. This article I just wanted to touch on was about the EU, but yes, I would believe their policies when it comes to the disabled would be much better than what Labour are putting forward at them. Anything is better than what Labour is doing when it comes to PIP, for example. So they would be very supportive of the disabled. I'd be very surprised if they're not. And we already have people like Zara Sultana and Zara Sultana in particular, who was kicked out because she voted against the government when it came to the 2-child benefit cap. So this is somebody who already has a principled stance. I know that they're not very popular in the mainstream. I understand that, and I think this is something that could create problems for them. Northern Ireland deserves a vote, though. There isn't support for Scotland for a referendum right now. Well, support for Scottish independence has always remained about just over 50%. I think this is the thing about Scottish independence. It's not talked about a lot in the media. When it is talked about, then you start to hear something about polling and stuff. But generally, polling has been low key, but it has remained above 50% for some time. And as Killer is in Scotland, says sustained 53% for Indy for over 2 years or so. Because many people tend to think about it as, the SNP. Well, the SNP are not doing very well, so that means that independence is losing support. No, it's not. The SNP is tied to independence, but independence is not tied to the SNP. Single market membership requires agreement of the 30 countries, and the Council membership of the EU needs to be approved by the 27. Yes, so if the UK wants to join, it needs all 27 countries to be on board. I don't really see a problem with that in the future. It would be a problem now because there's a risk of Nigel Farage getting in, and then what will be the point in allowing the UK in, and then the very next day Nigel Farage is in power and then he's like, we'll have another referendum to leave, or we're just going to leave, or we're not going to cooperate with the EU, or we're going to stop the process. So the EU would be like, no, we're not going to waste time on this. So I've said before, there needs to be consensus in Parliament, not within the country, but in Parliament, for the UK to rejoin. And if we're talking about Nigel Farage becoming Prime Minister, EU membership is going to be kicked into the long grass, the very long grass, very far away. Unfortunately, we're talking maybe at least 10 years before we're talking about it in a positive way. Because if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister, or if Reform get into a position of power, we're not going to be talking about rejoining the EU at any time, unfortunately. It's interesting though, it could have the effect of increasing support for the EU if Nigel Farage gets in, because Farage should be associated with Brexit, and he should be associated with failure. And if he gets into power, he's not going to improve the situation for ordinary people. So there would be a backlash against him, and hopefully a backlash against Brexit, an even greater one. Gareth says, thanks so much, Gareth. Was it ever a union of equals? Absolutely. Look at the Union Jack. England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales all fairly represent. Oh no, my bad. Equals my farce. Where's Wales? Of course, Wales was a part of the Kingdom of England. That's why it's not on the flag. I knew that. On support for rejoining, I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet, but your kids are going to love it. Oh, wonderful, Brad. I get the reference. I don't know if everyone does. I get the reference. Back to the Future for anyone who doesn't get the reference. It's going to be in the inaugural convention of Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana's party. I'll report back, good or bad. A bit of hope again though it is a tonic. I really hope they do well, because I think it's important for democracy that there are parties who are pushing also the left, pushing the government in the direction of looking after the people they're supposed to be looking after. You know, I don't agree with everything Jeremy Corbyn says and does, but and I understand that this could risk splitting the vote and helping Farage. But I keep saying to keep Farage out. See, Farage was leading in the polls before Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana even mentioned forming a party. So this can't be all blamed on Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. The blame has to be with the incumbent. The ball is in Labour's court now. They have to improve the situation and they have to communicate that to the public. If they're not able to do that, then Farage is going to march in, irrespective of what Jeremy Corbyn is doing. Jeremy Corbyn will not stop Farage. He will not help Farage get into power. He may be responsible for the number of seats Reform win or don't win. But Jeremy Corbyn's party at the moment, now this could change over the next number of years, but at the moment, Jeremy Corbyn should not be to blame for a Farage government. You know, I'm going to nail my colours to the mast on that, because it comes down to the incumbent. If the Labour Party do well, they improve the lives of ordinary people, then support for Jeremy Corbyn's party will whittle away. Because people will be like, well, why are we voting for these guys if things are actually getting better? There's a risk in voting for that. And there will be more scrutiny applied. And, you know, if Jeremy Corbyn's not able to, and his party is not able to stand up to scrutiny, then people will lose support. The same for Reform. Reform are doing really well at the moment. It's not a guarantee that their support will continue to rise. And the more we hear about Reform, the more people see them not being very functional when it comes to government, local government. It's turning off a lot of people. It's possible that Reform's vote share has peaked, or their support has peaked. Thanks, Urban Legends. We have another from Ivan. Thank you so much again, Ivan. You're very kind tonight. I'm open to the idea of the UK having a customs union with the EU, like Turkey has, and also the Pan-European Convention. Anything is better than the status quo when it comes to the European Union. So, yeah, I think it's rejoining the European Union will happen sometime in the future, but the relationship is going to improve over the next number of years. I think even with Farage in charge, they will try, you know, there'll be pressure on them to ease some of the friction. They will try and do something, I think. You know, they won't, of course, sell it as a good relationship with the European Union. They'll be like, well, no, it's about fixing some of the problems that the Tories left behind or Labour left behind. So I think there will be pressure on them to do something. And, you know, some wheels have already been set in motion when it comes to certain things about the EU. Although I could be wrong. Farage could just come in and, like Trump, tear up everything. But I don't see that happening. At least not yet. I always have to add caveats when it comes to Farage. Peter, once again, thank you so much, Peter. When we rejoin the EU, we're going to see. I'm not sure I get it. I'm not sure I get the reference. Thanks for that. I wanted to show you this clip. We're a little bit over the time, but I just wanted to show you this clip before we finish, because it's... Somebody was asking why I don't like the Tories. Well, this is one of the reasons I don't like the Tories. Michael Gove.
Obviously.
So Michael Gove was asked about what's happening in Gaza, and this is what he had to say.
Horrified by the images of dead children, starving children right now.
Right.
And your response when challenged about these things tends to be, well, blame Hamas, which is what the Israeli government says.
Yes, I
when you look
believe
at those images, what's your human reaction to them?
You're asking Michael Gove what his human reaction is. See, there's the problem there.
Given a lot of them are the result of Israeli bullets and Israeli blockade.
I believe that the suffering of the people of Gaza is due overwhelmingly to the actions of Hamas.
No,
So, there we go.
I know that's what you think intellectually, but I'm saying emotionally, how do you respond?
Krishna, you're asking the wrong question. You're asking for Michael Gove to have some humanity. There's the problem here. Michael Gove has no humanity. It's like asking a wall. It's asking about its feelings. Walls don't have feelings. In the same way as Tories like Michael Gove, I'm not saying all Tories are like this, but Tories like Michael Gove don't actually have a soul. As an atheist, I don't believe in a soul, but if I did believe in a soul, Michael Gove wouldn't have one. Does he have a heart? I think something is pumping blood around, but does he have a heart in the sense of, the emotional sense of heart? No, I don't think so.
On to what's going on in terms of the killing.
I think that it's horrendous that the people of Gaza, and indeed so many people in the Middle East, so many people in the world, live under regimes that are...
maybe he had a few quibbles about some aspects of it, but these are the people who decided what we're going to do is we're going to take money from poor people who have very little, and we're going to give it to rich people who don't need anything. And some people are going to die, but that's a price worth paying, because the rich people need more money. 300,000 people died as a result of austerity. There are different figures, but it's about that. Just think about that. 300,000 people died not because of a war, not because of some natural disaster, not because of some massive mistake. They died because of a policy that the Tories pushed through, and they knew it was going to cause damage. So asking Michael Gove about his humanity is a complete and utter waste of time. What was Gove sniffing when he said that? And this is a very interesting question, Brad. Marching powder. And Peter, thank you so much for that super chat. BTTF, I forget the acronym BTTF, reference when his car hits... okay, Biff reference. Sorry, Back to the Future reference. When his car hits 88 miles per hour. That was in reference to... When we rejoin the EU, we're going to see. Okay. Thanks for that. So, guys, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on tonight. Thank you so much to everyone who sent a super chat. Greatly appreciated. Thanks to all of you. Some buffering going on. Apologies about that. Connection. There was a bit of a storm here today, so hopefully it will clear up. I want to say thank you to the moderators for doing a wonderful job, as always. And thanks to everyone who smashed the like button. So before we go, remember, we have our one video for the road. Hope you enjoyed this. And it's a bit of a spicy one, on topic as well, a bit of a spicy one on topic. And I will see you on Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. Stay safe, take care. But before we go, we enjoy this one.
Welcome to Broken News. It's the dawn of a puritanical new age, as the UK government has put an end to the great British tradition of cheekily cracking one out. Millions across the country now have to verify their age in order to view adult content online, rendering the creamy knuckle shuffle a thing of the past. Our reporter has more.
Well, Vera Lynn famously fapped for freedom atop the White Cliffs of Dover before performing for our boys. Lord Admiral Lord Nelson was renowned for buttering his parsnip furiously before a big battle, and even Her Majesty the Queen frotted herself rotten before state dinners in a greasy slick of nervous anxiety. But now, because of this document, that's all set to change. This is the government's online safety bill. Experts say it could mean the end of end-to-end encryption and the ending of befriending and tending to of bell ends from Bridgend to Enderby. Indeed, statisticians say they've already seen reductions in randy hand shandies, throwing a cheeky fiver up your own slot machine, smashing a meaty 5-iron at the lonely driving range, frothy finger food at the bushy buffet, and the traditional pokey bum tug. And it has profound implications for some of the biggest adult websites in the world, including pornhub.com, hornyboomers.ie, and hotbrownchessbiscuits.net. But there are questions over individual freedoms. Earlier, I spoke to professional grifter and ship plane crash survivor Nigel Farage.
Well, look, this is a gross invasion of our civil liberties by Keir Starmer and the woke left. It's disgusting.
What concerns you most?
Well, look, put it this way. When I'm not neglecting my constituents or desperately seeking Donald, there are only two things that I love.
Oh, and what are they?
sinking a pint of nut brown ale in a proper British pub with all of my definitely many mates.
Right.
And watching videos of chaps sucking off dogs.
Right, and do you think the implications... Sorry, did you say sucking off dogs?
Absolutely, Ian. Can I call you Ian?
Well, my name's Tim.
There's nothing that Nigel Farage likes better, Ian, than viewing and occasionally participating in the joyous act of munching off man's best friend. I'm at my best when I've got my leathery lips around a Labrador's lipstick length. And this online safety bill is not only an egregious overstep on the part of the state, but also seriously hampers my ability to indulge in the noble pastime of watching people, grown men, take into their willing mouths a collie's dong.
I'm sorry, Mr. Farage, I think we'll have to leave that there. Back to you.
Tim, thank you. Well, Broken News has just received this statement from teenage boys everywhere. It reads, "This is government overreach. We stand against mandated monitoring of user content. This bill undermines our right to private conversations, freedom of expression, and we're deeply concerned about punitive custodial sentences for the vague notion of harm. Also, we're going to go out happy slapping grannies if you don't let us have a big wank." What a lovely story. That's all from Broken News. You're up to date.
Oh my goodness. Oh, we have a super chat from Brad. Darren Grimes is devastated. He can't get crafty anymore. So guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. And stay safe. And remember, if you're going to log on to any of these channels, well, you need to check your age first. Take care. See you soon and have a good one.